Hello and welcome. My name is Alex Mondosian, and in this masterclass, I want to introduce to you the podcast episode coaching method. The podcast episode coaching method. It's utilizing free content and getting paid as a mentor. Now, the first question is, what is the podcast episode coaching method? Well, quite simply, when you have a podcast on iTunes or on Stitcher or on Google Play, then you have episodes that are either an interview-based episode where you're interviewing somebody, or a content-based episode, which is what I do at allsellingaside.com, and it's free. People get to listen to it for free. Now, at allsellingaside.com, that's my website for my podcast. That's where you can get the notes to the podcast. And that's the complete notes. And you can see every episode I've done so far. I have no idea when you're watching or listening or reading this masterclass. So I don't know how many episodes we have, but most likely it will be many more than you expected. And they're all free. It's 25 years of sales and marketing knowledge and mistakes that I now avoid. And it's put into 25 minutes of content richness week after week after week. Now, if you don't know about iTunes, you can go to iTunes on your mobile phone or on your laptop, and you can subscribe there. But All Selling Aside is my podcast. There are other podcasts that have a lot more reach and exposure and visibility. But I don't know anyone other than yours truly, Alex Mondosian, who makes money off of their podcast, not through sponsorships, not through selling other things via a lead magnet or an ethical bribe where there's a course that is sold, but through mentoring. Now, how do you mentor free content? Well, it's easy. You have the podcast episodes, and then you have a mentor assigned to you who will have you go deeper and drill at the execution level of things. We believe in three ways to experience any kind of content. You have an intention with the content, you have a purpose with the content, and you have a strategy with the content. The intention is, what do I want to learn? The purpose is, why do I want to learn it? And the strategy is, how am I going to learn it? With my podcast, it's through the spoken word. It's through the ears, but it's also the written word through the eyes. I don't have a video podcast, although my Facebook Fridays Live is video, which is repurposed. And although it's not a podcast, you can see it on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and all the other social media channels. Now, a podcast that has many episodes can also have coaching, because the coach's job is to teach you how to do the fourth thing: intention, purpose, strategy. But then how do you bring all those three things to life? You have execution. And if you don't execute, then you don't have a business. So that's what your coach does. A coach will set a deadline, that's when, and will set an accountability partner, that's who. Who's going to get this done? It could be you. And when is it going to get done? The intention is, what do I want to do? The purpose is, why do I want to do it? The strategy is, how do I do it? But none of those things are actually executing. The execution is, who's doing it? It could be you. And when is it getting done? That's the deadline. And when you have those four things, then you have a business. Now, here's another question, and that is, why is the podcast episode coaching method so important to your business growth? Well, first of all, the benefit of having a podcast is you get more visibility and reach on a platform that has at least 1 billion viewers and listeners. That's iTunes, and that's just one. There's also Google Play, there's also Stitcher, and there's SoundCloud and many other platforms where people can listen to your podcast. But who ever heard of getting a coach and learning your podcast from the execution stage so that you can actually apply and make money from something that's free? So our coaches who coach the podcast, allsellingaside.com, what they do is they have a curriculum based on the episodes and the episode content. Now, my format is content-based. I don't interview anyone at the time of this recording. And so I have a story to start things out. And then I give 3 insights. and then I have a review. Then I ask for a subscription. So if you go to iTunes and you look for All Selling Aside and you look for half of my face, because that's my image I have on the thumbnail of the podcast, then please subscribe. You do that through iTunes, review one episode, and give me your biggest aha or your big takeaway from that specific episode, not on the entire podcast, just that one episode. And then iTunes will ask you to rate it, and I hope you give me a 5-star rating, right? Got it? Now, imagine if you had a coach and the coach said, okay, we're going to teach you and mentor you on these episodes. So you already have the curriculum, and maybe you can direct what episodes you want to be coached on. The coach knows all about it because the coach has studied the podcast and probably knows all of the lessons I teach anyway. I mean, this is 25 years of know-how in 25-minute chunks week after week. So this is a great way for you to start coaching, or for you to have a coaching program with content that's already been delivered for free. You're monetizing free content, and I think it's very unique, it's very clever, and it is content rich. Now, the next question is, how does podcast episode coaching method work? Now, I believe I could have a better name and a sexier name than the podcast episode coaching method. I could call it, for my podcast, All Selling Aside Podcast Coaching. But what about your podcast? Do you have a podcast? Do you want a podcast? Your coaching method would be different than mine. So how does any coaching method with a podcast work? Well, first of all, you need to have at least 40 episodes. Because if you have 20, I don't think it's enough. 40, you have plenty. Now, some people have thousands of episodes. Now, with those episodes, the first 3 months, you pick the podcast for your listener and for your coaching client. You can charge them $100 a month. You can charge them $500 a month, depending on how often you meet. But the curriculum is based on the notes and the audio, in some cases video, of each podcast episode. Now, I would love to coach once a week. So that's what my method invites you to do, is to be coached once a week. And the coaching is $400 a month, or $100 of coaching. It lasts about 45 minutes. The podcast itself is half of that time, is 25 minutes. And the goal is to implement what you learned in that free podcast episode. Now, other people are getting it for free, but they're not getting the coaching. They're not getting the accountability. They're not getting the execution. They are getting the intention, purpose, and strategy, but they're not getting the execution. Now, what if you had 1 year of coaching and you had at least 52 episodes? Well, then we could call that 52 ways to coach paid clients and maximize their business visibility. If your podcast is about business, what if you coached once a week? What if you charged them $100 a month? That's $25 per coaching. What if you charged $250 a month or $500 a month? It's up to you. Whatever you charge them, you're delivering free content that the world has, but what they're not getting is the coaching, which is paid. So you're monetizing free content. It's very unique. I think it's clever, and it's a creative way to monetize what you did for free. Now, step one is to start with a podcast editorial calendar. Now, an editorial calendar is what you're going to teach in the future. Without an editorial calendar, you're very reactive. With an editorial calendar, you are responsive. You're responding. You have responsibility, your ability to respond based on the topics and the stories and the titles and the moral of the story of each episode. Now, step number 2 is for you to title the 52 episodes for 1 year's worth of content. Now, there's 52 weeks in a year. I recommend coaching weekly. And what if you charged $100 to $300 a month? What if you're new to coaching? Wouldn't that be a great way for you to have coaches work for you, or for you to coach and monetize podcasts that otherwise wouldn't get you any money? You would monetize them through sponsorships. I think you would get more reach if you had mentoring or coaching through your podcast. Step number 3 is utilize the magic formula for each episode. So when you're coaching, the goal is to have a podcast that is content rich. Now, I believe in interview type podcasts, some of the most successful podcasts in the world. Joe Rogan's podcast is an interview style, but I believe in content-based podcast and interview. So after I have 52 episodes, then I go twice a week and I do an interview-based podcast called All Selling Aside, interviews, and then the content-based one where it's just me. I'm coaching and mentoring or having other people coach and mentor on my podcast for the episode version because the interview, I never know what direction that thought leader is going to go. So that's just additional fodder, that's bonus. But if I'm going to do a episode version of my podcast and coach for it and make money, I do content-based. So if you have an interview show right now, go content-based and go twice a week. If you have a content-based show, then I would also do interviews as well as bonus. But now you have the DNA, the anatomy of creating and monetizing money, making money from something that was free. Now, what's the magic formula? My podcast follows the Dale Carnegie magic formula. It's over 100 years old, and it's 3 parts. You tell a story, you give the action that you want them to take, the call to action, and then the benefits they'll gain. Now, the story is about 80% of the process. The action is about 5%. Here's what I want you to do. And the benefits are about 15%. So I'm telling you a story of how to make money with your podcast by coaching. Okay. So I would tell you a story of how it started. Maybe it's the story that you just heard of how this came to be. The action would be go to allsellingaside.com, go to allsellingaside.com and listen to that podcast and decide whether or not you want to be coached. That's the action. The benefit you'll gain is you'll learn more from each episode. You'll learn how to monetize what you gain from each episode, and you'll be a better storyteller and presenter. Those are the benefits. So that's the magic formula. When I talk about magic formula, it's what Dale Carnegie invented many years ago with the Dale Carnegie training. I used to be a Dale Carnegie trainer, and I consulted Dale Carnegie training centers. I started with one in New York City. So the story is about 80% of the process. The action is just 5%. It's very brief, just what you want them to do. Like go to allsellingaside.com. And the benefits, I like to give 3, but 2 is good too. 1 is not enough, is you'll gain more clarity, you'll do things better, and you'll do things on your own terms. Those are benefits. Now, step 4 of the podcast episode coaching method is pre-record 12 episodes before you launch on iTunes. One of the greatest joys and advantages of having a podcast, whether it's video or audio, is you get to dictate your own terms. I pre-record a bunch of episodes and then I have it uploaded. And there are services that can be utilized for less than $500 a month. Well, they'll edit it, they'll do the notes, they'll post it, they'll make sure that you're hosted properly. And so you want to do a bunch of episodes so that you have at least some time before you have to do new ones. I'm usually 2 months ahead. So whether I'm doing one a week or twice a week, I'm always about 2 months ahead. And I like 12 episodes to start with because when we launch, I like to have 3 or 4 episodes to launch and then 1 per week. And then eventually after a year, I like to do 2 per week. For me, it's content-based and interview-based. I started with content-based, and then after a year, it goes to interview-based, where I'm interviewing someone. Step 5 is utilize the public podcast as content for private paid coaching with clients. Now, this is totally unique. I don't see people doing this. Sometimes they suggest it or insinuate it, but what if the core curriculum was not in a members area? What if it was completely public? But your coaching, whether it was via Zoom or Skype or on the phone, what if that was private? Well, that's what podcast episode coaching method is all about. Now, here's the key point. Accountability and application of content is worth payment. So listening or watching content like you're doing now. You're listening, you're viewing it, you're probably reading it, whatever format it takes for you to consume it, because this masterclass is repurposed in 3 different ways. It's video, audio, and through the written word. Well, there's no guarantee you're going to execute what I'm teaching you. There's no guarantee that you're actually going to do the work. But if you paid for me to coach you, or paid for one of my coaches to coach you, which would be a lot more reasonable in cost to you, then you would execute what I'm teaching you right now, even if it were just having your own podcast and creating a coaching method around it. Now, what are 3 counterintuitive reasons why most coaching relationships fail? Coaching relations do fail. If you're a coach or a consultant, you will have failing clients. And the biggest failure that I have learned over the years comes from George Mondosian. He is my father. He was born in the Middle East, in the city of Jerusalem, in the Armenian Christian quarter there. And then after the Palestine became Israel, then my family left and went to the United States. And my father met my mother. And then a few years later, I was born, right? Now, the biggest lesson I've learned from my dad, who was a civil engineer. He got a civil engineering degree from the University of California at Los Angeles. That's UCLA. He wanted to be an architect at the University of Southern California, which is USC, but he couldn't afford to attend USC. So instead of being an architect, he became an engineer. Engineering is about execution, and architecture is about artistry. So he went through the execution route. And he has taught me that it takes 28 days for concrete to dry, most concrete. And if you ignore the 28-day, right, trap of losing interest, it takes the same amount of time for your clients to lose interest. It takes about 28 days. It's the same amount of time it takes for concrete to dry. Concrete drying is an analogy or a metaphor of their interest drying up, of their excitement drying up, of their inspiration to dry up. So losing interest is about a lack of engagement. Now, if you have a podcast and people listen to it for free, well, the engagement comes in with the mentoring, and that's how you get paid. How do you engage new clients? Well, you do 3 things. Now, there's a dark side to this, because some of the most destructive cults and movements throughout humanity have also utilized these 3 things. But some of the most productive and heartwarming and useful spiritual traditions and movements have also utilized these 3 parts of engagement. And here they are. Number 1, a new vocabulary. Number 2, a new community. And number 3, a new sponsor. Now, what do these mean? Well, a new vocabulary, that's utilizing a glossary of terms that is unique to you. Every time I launch a new course, whether it's Stick Strategy Secrets with Joe Polish of Genius Network, or it's my Teleseminar Secrets course, which I retired in 2010, or it's Web Communication Secrets or Guerrilla Business Online, I always and typically have a glossary of terms which has a unique language. And the reason you have a unique language is it separates your students from other courses and other movements. Now, if you look at, let's say, a recovery movement such as Alcoholics Anonymous, which has done a lot of good for a lot of people for nearly 100 years, they have their own vocabulary, a new vocabulary. And my podcast has its own vocabulary. When I go to Wizard Academy and I see my marketing mentor, Roy H. Williams, and I have an event there called the Pathfinder Mastermind, we have a vocabulary there that is just unique to Wizard Academy in Austin. How about community, a new community? Not enough to have a new vocabulary. It's a new type of language, a new dialect. It may be in English, but it's a new dialect. That's why I call it a new vocabulary, not a new language. But what about the community? Well, the community is usually a Facebook group. Sometimes it can be an event, a mastermind. And that new Community is speaking the new vocabulary within the language they speak. It could be in any language, really. And now you're separating yourself with everyone else. And, you know, when I say destructive, Hitler did this, you know, with the swastika and with the language that he spoke amongst the Nazis. But the Christians have done this as well. So have the Buddhists. So have the Muslims. And so have other spiritual traditions throughout the past. Many of the great thought leaders will utilize a new vocabulary and a new community to help build their movement. If you know some of the great authors like Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he had a new vocabulary, he had a new community that ended up becoming Franklin Covey. And then the third thing are the new sponsors, which a sponsor is like a role model. In Alcoholics Anonymous or any recovery program, a sponsor is someone who brings you in. Your coach, your mentor can be your sponsor. So if you have all three, a new vocabulary, a new community, a new sponsor within that community, then you will most likely be successful. If you ever had the misfortune of going to jail because of something you did, you will go back to jail if you don't have those three things. The new language that you learn is what you learn when you get out of jail and you're on parole. Your new community are all the people who have gone out of jail at the same time that you have, so that you can have meetings like any recovery group. And then your sponsor is your parole officer. So in our business, the vocabulary is the glossary of terms, the community is our private Facebook group, and then the sponsor is the mentor or the coach. And then I'm ultimately the head sponsor, where I'm teaching students what I've learned over the years. So that's the first oversight. That's counterintuitive. The second one is ignoring the importance of many early wins. Now, what does this mean? Well, having a win is feeling successful. So the moment someone says yes to you, if you have a podcast and you decide to coach them, then make sure that they can report a win, which is a new language, a new vocabulary, inside your Facebook group that you give them access to and you accept them. That's the new community. And if you're the sponsor, you're their coach or mentor, then you now are congratulating them on the early win. When they have early wins, they become more engaging. When they engage, they won't fall into the 28-day trap, which is how concrete dries and your inspiration dies. Now, a win is an excuse for public celebration. So when I say wins, I mean multiple wins, but it's an excuse for a public celebration. So if you say, hey, I just joined the community, then everyone says, congratulations. If you say, hey, I'm Alex and I'm originally from Pasadena, I'm Armenian descent, and I currently live in the Bay Area, that's where I'm from, well, that's another win because you're reporting to the community. If you say, the reason why I'm here is I want to learn how to monetize a new coaching methodology, it's called the podcast episode coaching method, then everyone celebrates with you. Congratulations. And if you say, this is the way I can serve other people, I know a lot about teaching formats, and if you need to learn how to build a curriculum, come to me and I'll be happy to assist you as a part of the student body. So that's what we do. Where are you from? Why are you here? How can you serve? We have early wins when people introduce themselves in the community. And then one of the things to avoid, and the third thing for this masterclass, is ignoring the importance of normalized obstacles. Now, that's a new vocabulary. That's something that you don't hear often. What's a normalized obstacle? Well, an obstacle is a roadblock. It's a locked door. And if you believe it's normal to have locked doors from where you are now, point A, to where you want to be, then guess what? You are defining reality the way reality should be defined. All you need is a key. And every locked door requires a new key. One size does not fit all. The only universal law is that there are no universal laws. That's something my good friend Ryan Levesque taught me. He developed the ASK method. He considers me the godfather of the ASK methodology, but if mine was 1.0 in 2001, his is 3.0. in 2019 and beyond. And what I learned from him, now I've known it internally, but I had to hear it outside of my body, outside of my mind, that the only universal law is that there are no universal laws. There is no key unifying theory. If physicist Niels Bohr or Albert Einstein couldn't figure out a unifying theory, then what makes you think you're so smart or I'm so smart that we can come up with one? So that means there's no universal key. Many people think that when there's one obstacle, you get past it, and let's say that's a locked door, the key that you just made to open up that door, which you can call a strategy, is going to open up the next door. But that's not the case. You have to be a locksmith. You have to be a keysmith. You have to develop a new key so that you have like 5 to 9 different keys on this key ring, old school style, and you're opening doors every single time. Once you open a door, it's like knowing a recipe. You can do it again and again. Here's the key point. Okay, struggles bring more meaning to succeeding in life and business. When you are struggling, there's a great movie, it's about 3 hours long, called The Shawshank Redemption. It's about a man who was accused of killing his wife, and he was wrongly accused. He was stuck in jail for over a decade, and he finally made an escape, and he crawled out this tunnel that was 500 meters, and it was full of sewage from the prison. Okay, what's sewage? It's crap, feces. And it was full of sewage, and he vomited and he crawled, and it took him, I don't know how long to get through the 500 meters. But when he got out the other end, that was a struggle. And even though it was raining, the rain just washed all the sewage off of his body. And then he met his friend who got out legally on a paradise island. The Shawshank Redemption. Great movie. Check it out if you can. Now, who have struggled? Who are some of the people who have struggled and we know them to be great entrepreneurs? Well, Steve Jobs comes to mind. Okay, he was fired from Apple and he came back for the second best act in human history. It was the second act in being in business. He was taken out of his own company and he came back, and look what he did with the iPod and the iPad and the iPhone and now the iWatch. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, at about age 13 or 14, maybe 15, his country was invaded, and he had to walk through the Himalaya mountains and end up in Dharamsala, India, which is northern India. And he went through a lot of struggle. Now he talks about compassion, and he's very well known as one of the true spiritual leaders throughout humanity who are still living. J.K. Rowling wrote the first Harry Potter book with her daughter sleeping on her lap in coffee shops in England. Her parents said, "You can't do it." She was divorced, I believe, after she started. She went through a lot of struggle, and look what she created. She's a billionaire. And then Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc didn't make money until his late 50s. What he did is he went through the struggle of trying to sell hamburgers and fries called McDonald's until he realized, why am I not in the business of land? Why don't I sell the land which I buy to my franchisees, and why don't I own the land as the franchisor? So that way I'll get a royalty from sales, and I'll also make rent no matter what, because I'm in the business of land. McDonald's is not in the business of burgers and fries. They're in the business of property, okay? So these are origin stories. ETR stands for Earn the Right. I know T. Harv Eker, Blair Singer, and other people talk about their ETR speech. That has come across over the years through a lot of thought leaders, but I happen to like Blair and Harv the most. And ETR means, why have you earned the right to be who you are today? Well, I have my own earn the right story. It was about a woman feeding pigeons in MacArthur Park in 1989 after I lost $242,000 before I moved home with my mother. And I would love to tell you that everything changed, but it didn't. The house went into foreclosure, and somehow I persuaded and influenced the Small Business Administration banker not to foreclose on the home. I built a business 3 years later in the infomercial business. I was one of the first to sell the Tony Robbins Personal Power in 1990 on television in the infomercial business, and fast forward to 1995, and I got into the internet marketing world because what happened on television was even less expensive on the internet. And I'm a digital marketer. I'm before Google, BG. Google came out around the year 2000. It wasn't a big deal then. But by 2004, 2005, it became a big deal. Then Facebook, then Twitter, then all the other social media you're very familiar with today. Well, I'm a digital marketer, and I have a show every Friday called Facebook Fridays, and it's marketingonline.com/Friday Live, marketingonline.com. I got at the turn of the 21st century. It's a great domain, and I've been teaching internet marketing on 6 different continents, and I hope to do that in Antarctica one day once people start to migrate down there because penguins don't understand English. Okay, so that's my Earn the Right story. That was the 1-minute version. I tell it in 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Now, what about 4 clarifying questions that every coach must ask to serve clients better? Now, hold your hat on this one because these questions are powerful. The origin of these questions come from Monsieur René Descartes, the Cartesian quadrant questions. Now, if you haven't heard of it, then stay tuned. If you've done any neuro-linguistic training for neuro-linguistic programming, which started at the University of Santa Cruz, not far from where I live in Northern California, then you'll be familiar with this. And many people don't use it the way it should be used or utilized. So what I do is I take these questions and I think of them in a very specific way. I'll go and I will put an index card with the problem I'm facing. So for example, shall I launch beyondbooksales.com in 2019? What's beyondbooksales.com, bbs.com? Well, you'll find out. But I'll ask myself, shall I launch it? So that's the problem. That's the predicament I'm in. And I'll write down beyondbooksales.com on an index card, and I'll put it on a table. And the table is not a round table. It has 4 sides. And my good friend, Bob Proctor from Toronto, taught me this method. I've learned and have known about the Cartesian questions for about 20 years, but about 10 years ago, Bob taught me this method, and it viscerally, physically gets me more engaged and involved. So since this is a coaching masterclass, I want to teach you how to do it as well. So you have a problem, you can have your team or just you figure out the question and the answer in 4 different perspectives or points of view, POV. So the first question is, what could happen if we did move forward? Okay, so the example I'm giving you is beyond book sales. You don't know what it is, but I know what it is. So what could happen if I did move forward with beyond book sales? And on the table, I put down the card that says beyond book sales, and I'm looking at it, and I'm writing down all the things, I'm recording all the things, and it's going straight to rev.com and getting transcribed. Now, when I think I've exhausted all the things that could happen if I did move forward, then what I do is I turn the card that says beyond book sales in another direction, and I go around on the other side of the table, and I look down at it, and I ask this question. I ask, what would not happen if we did move forward? So there's certain things that could happen if we did move forward, but what wouldn't happen if we did move forward? And I ask that question physically situated from another angle on the table, so I'm getting my whole body involved and engaged. Are you following me? It's important. If you have a big takeaway right now, I want you to write it down because we're only halfway through the 4 questions. And I think Monsieur Descartes would have loved the fact that we're doing this. He's known for saying, I think, therefore I am. In fact, he not only said that, he said, if I doubt that I think, then I'm still thinking. So if I doubt, I am. I exist because I doubt. Okay, maybe that's going too deep for the purposes of this masterclass, but stick with me. Question number 3, what I do is I go to another part of the table, the third side, and I write down what the problem is. In this case, the Beyond Book Sales project. Okay, that's my project. You can come up with your own. And the third question is, what could happen if we didn't move forward? Now that's different than what could happen if we did move forward and what wouldn't happen if we did move forward. What could happen if we did not move forward? That's another perspective to the same question. And then if you're wondering what we do with question number 4, again, I change the situation of the card, same question, topic, okay, but the question changes to what wouldn't happen if we didn't move forward. What wouldn't happen if we didn't move forward? So quick summary, what could happen if we did move forward? What wouldn't happen if we did move forward? What could happen if we didn't move forward? And what wouldn't happen if we didn't move forward? Now, the most challenging question is the 4th one. You give that a thought. You can go back and watch the replay or listen or read the replay to what you're watching and listening or reading right now. These are called the Cartesian quadrants. And make sure that you ask these questions and force 4 different points of view. It's not just what's going to happen if we did this. It's what isn't going to happen if we did this. Okay? What isn't going to happen if we didn't do this? What is going to happen if we didn't do this? And what isn't going to happen if we didn't do it? Right? So what could happen if we move forward? What wouldn't happen if we did move forward? What wouldn't happen if we did move forward? And what wouldn't happen if we didn't move forward? Okay, that's my 3rd summary. That's the last time I'll say it. Now, what's your next step? Your next step is to get access to my podcast because it's free. 25 years of sales and marketing know-how. If you hate to sell and you're a coach, a consultant, or a service professional, you are the ideal listener. And if you want mentoring and coaching, then that will cost you money. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to give you access to the free material until you're ready to get coached. And that's purely up to you. Now, if you're inside of North America, I want you in the area where you type in a phone number, because this is not in your contact list, type in 415-980-3555. If you're in North America, that's Canada and the United States. The keyword where the message goes, when you're texting, when you text, you put the message there. Normally, you text someone whose number they're in your contact list. But in this case, you're sending it to 415-980-3555 on your phone. The keyword without quotations is ASA, which stands for All Selling Aside. If you're inside of North America, the fastest, easiest, most reliable way to get back access to my podcast is simply to send a text. Now, if you're outside of North America, which the majority of the people who watch my Facebook Fridays live show are, and my master classes, then go to marketingonline.com/ASA. Once again, marketingonline.com/ASA. The final point for this masterclass is that free content can be monetized if you couple it, meaning if you put it together with private coaching. Your free content, any podcast, any blog, anything that you do for free can be fee-based if you put it together or couple it, marry it with coaching or mentoring. I'm Alex Mondosian. I hope our paths cross again soon, either with one of my mentors or on my Friday live shows. You simply go to marketingonline.com/Friday Live. You can get my podcast at allsellingaside.com or on my YouTube channel. You can go to youtube.com/Alex Mondosian and you will learn digital marketing strategies that are worthy of your devotion. I hope our paths cross again soon.